What's up, everybody? My name is Shannon and I am still waiting for my Satyr, and today we are going to be talking about my most disappointing reads of the year so far. So not that long ago I posted like my favorite reads of the year so far, and I got a comment under it saying like I should do my like least like reads, my most disappointing reads, and a lot of you guys were like upping that vote, and I was like, okay, yes, I can definitely do that because this has been a weird year for books. I've had a lot that I have really liked, and then I've had others where I've read it and I'm just like, I'm just disappointed. I'm just disappointed. It's not necessarily that like I hated it or it was bad or whatever, but like it was just disappointing. It wasn't what I was expecting. And I don't get that a ton, but this year I feel like I've been getting it quite a bit. So right off the bat, I'm gonna say there are probably gonna be spoilers in this video just because a lot of you also expressed like wanting to know my exact reasons for why I don't like certain books or like what the problem was. So I'm just not gonna hold myself back. So if you don't want to be spoiled on any of these reads, like I do have spoiler-free reviews, but let's get into it. So my first one I read in January, like right at the beginning of the year, and that was Goddess in the Machine. Listen, like I love a good Sleeping Beauty retelling, and I had just read A Spindled Splintered, or I read that around the same time, and that book was so good, and like this was gonna be a sci-fi Sleeping Beauty, and it was gonna be cool, and I was excited, and it just, man, that book was so hard to get through. And the main thing is because like it's set so far in the future, and they were really trying to highlight that, you know, she'd been asleep for so long and culture and things have changed, so the language had changed. And that was just so off-putting to hear these characters talk in this weird kind of shorthand. And like, sure, if you pulled somebody out from like 100 years ago and like put them in now, like they'd probably think that we talk weird too, but like it was very off-putting as a reader to the point where I couldn't stand any character, because anytime they were talking, I'm like, you just sound so stupid. So it kept me from really getting into the book, and then the story itself just really wasn't anything special. The next one is Bonds of Brass, which is the Storm Pilot book, which I heard a lot about. So like I was interested. Like, listen, I love the Storm Pilot ship. I'm kind of more like a relaxed Storm Pilot shipper. Like obviously I'm a very hardcore Raylo, but I love me some background Storm Pilot. So I was interested. However, like not only is this book like it is Storm Pilot, which is good. Like you can really tell that like it is that Star Wars fan fiction, but like the background ships in it were like, you and I are not the same type of Star Wars fan. Like you and I are not the same kind of Star Wars fan. Like especially the Rey character was just characterized really strangely. I personally felt like the only thing that made this Storm Pilot was the picture on the cover and like a little bit of the personalities, because the characterization just wasn't done really well. And like, listen, I know like this is its own book, it's original content. It's not supposed to be just straight fan fiction. However, going into it knowing that, I was looking for those things. I was looking for some of that familiar comfort, and it wasn't there. And then on top of that, the story was just kind of weird. The twists I didn't really enjoy. So it just made it kind of like a meh read. And it even got to the point where I was reading this book and it was going so slow. I was dragging my feet so much that I downloaded the audiobook just so I could get through it faster. This one I really debated putting in here, but it is The Fallen Star by our Lord and Savior Claudia Gray from the High Republic. Listen, I was just disappointed. It just wasn't what I was expecting. I really love the High Republic, and like the Rising Storm was so good. So going into The Fallen Star, like my hopes were really high, and it just wasn't there. I feel like the story was too one-sided because there were other plot lines that we didn't get to see because they were happening in other content. And up until The Fallen Star, I felt like you could pick and choose what you wanted to read and things were still making sense. However, with The Fallen Star, it really felt like if you weren't reading the comics, you missed a huge chunk of the story. And like those parts of the comics hadn't even come out yet. So I'm reading like the High Republic 14 and 15 and I'm like, oh, okay, so this is what happened to Avar, this is what happened to this thing. Like, the Nameless didn't even make sense until I was reading Trail of Shadows, and you actually get to see the Nameless. Like, that was so lost on me when reading The Fallen Star. It just was nonstop action, and it didn't make a lot of sense. And on top of that, Stellan Gios freaking dies. Like, what the heck? I can't believe Claudia did me so dirty like that. Although I am firmly in the camp that Stellan Gios is not dead, because he was in there with all those Nameless that cut off your force connection, so they're all like, oh, we can't sense him. And I think his force connection is just gone, because the same thing happens with Luke Skywalker. Like, he completely cuts himself off from the force. So personally, where I would like the story to go is that we discover, like, a Stellan Gios who has been, like, wandering and has completely lost himself because he doesn't have the Force connection. He was supposed to be Mr. Perfect Jedi. To me, that is such a better story than him just being this martyr who died on Starlight Beacon. And, like, I wanted this to be Avar's book, and she's a comic character, and I get it, but at the end, she really felt like just a reward for Elzar, and it rubbed me the wrong way. So, like, it's not bad, it just was so disappointing. The next one is What Kind of Girl by Alyssa B. Scheinmal, and I read this because I really loved A Danger to Herself and Others. That book was so good, it was so into it, like, it was really, like, a lot, especially, like, with mental illness. So, like, I knew that going into What Kind of Girl, like, I knew she wrote like that. But it was really triggering for me because of the self-harm aspect of it. In my personal life, I have dealt with, not me personally, but people very close to me who have dealt with this. And the way it was handled in this book was just very triggering to me. And on top of that, the one who was dealing with self-harm was also struggling with this very severe, debilitating anxiety, which hit a little bit too close to home with my own personal anxieties, to the point where, like, I almost completely stopped reading this book, but instead I just skipped that character's parts and just stuck to the other ones. I don't think this book did what Alyssa B. Scheinmal was, like, wanting it to do. And for that reason, like, I would highly, highly, highly not recommend reading this book. Like, if you see this book, look the other way. Like, don't even crack it open, because to me, it wasn't handled well at all. Back to books that I had very high hopes for, and then it turned out to be so disappointing. Anatomy, a Love Story. God, like, just so bad. So bad. You can't call yourself a love story and then have the book not be, like, this romantic, sweeping love story. Like, this book was just about a girl who wanted to be, like, a mortuary. Like, that's it. And yeah, she has this romance, but the love interest is not characterized at all. It's so boring. And then he freaking dies at the end. Like, what the heck? I was so, like, I was angry and kind of, like, whatever about this book. But then when he died, he literally gets arrested for what they discover. Like, they find the person who's behind all the murders, but the love interest gets arrested anyway and then is hung. Like, what? How is that a good ending to a book that is called The Love Story? So, like, that was just, like, straight up a 2-star read. I was like, this is not it, fam. This is not it. Right after that, I was like, I want some witchy vibes. I want some good witchy vibes. And I had The Winterwood by Shay Earnshaw, like, on my list. And I'm like, you know what? We're going to read this. I'm excited. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be witchy. And, like, listen, the vibes were good. I liked the vibes. However, story itself, so bad. The witch in the woods finds this dead boy, and, like, is he dead? We don't know. Is he a ghost? We don't know. He survived in the snow, blah, blah, blah. And, like, the bones of a story is there for it to be good, but it was just so bland. And there would just be these huge flowery passages where they're just, like, staring at each other and thinking about things that have already been written down. So, like, I've already read it before, and it just was so annoying to get through. And like I said, like, the vibes were there. I liked this idea of her being this witch in the woods and finding this boy, and he turns out to actually be a ghost. Like, I love that idea, but it was just so boring. I read this book very recently. It is The Electric Kingdom, and, like, listen, I do not read a ton of male authors. I read, and, like, that's not necessarily by choice, it just kind of happens. I was really interested in this. I love a girl and her dog in the apocalypse at the end of the world. Like, I love that kind of story. This book turned out to be very religious. And personally, I'm not a religious person, so when I get into books like that, I'm like, okay, you know, whatever. But with this, it wasn't hitting correctly for me. And the main girl, I felt like became such a stand-in for the little boy's mom. And that's something that, like, I don't like. I wanted her to exist on her own, and instead, like, she literally became, like, this little boy's mom. And then the little boy dies. Like, whatever. Listen, I didn't like the little boy because he was super annoying. So when he died, I was like, hey, I don't have to read his perspective anymore. But, like, it was so weird that he just dies. He was half of the story, and he dies, and it didn't have any weight at all. This book ends, and it's like, did he even need to be there? What was his perspective? What was it giving to the story? Literally nothing. This book could have just been about Nico, and, like, it would have been different. It still wouldn't have been good, but, like, it just, the choices that were made were not adding up. The last book that I'm going to talk about for disappointing books that I've read so far in 2022, I literally just put a video out for this. It's The Atlas 6. I was excited about this book. Dark Academia, cool vibes, Hermione, yes, love that ship. And it wasn't good. It just wasn't good. Like, I even said this in my Evelyn Hugo video, like, I'm kind of, like, dipping my toe a little bit more into, like, those new adult reads, you know, like, that kind of thing. And I even expressed that, like, I was a little bit worried about that because I'm a very character-driven person. Like, I'm not a plot person, and I like those, like, good emotions. I like that good angst, which you still get in YA, which is why I kind of stick more to YA. So with Atlas 6, I'm like, okay, I mean, if it's Hermione, like, it's gonna be interesting. Like, I'm gonna be able to, like, see it in these characters, and I'm gonna like that dynamic and that kind of thing. But this was an ensemble book. Like, it was about all 6 characters. All 6 of them had a perspective, which I listened to the audiobook, and I kind of go back and forth on if I like books that have multiple narrators or not. And in this case, I didn't like it because just not all the voices fit. And then when you switch back and forth, sometimes you forget who's speaking because they all have a different voice because they all have different narrators. So it was just a little bit weird to get through for that reason. But then also, like, the Nico and Libby dynamic, which is what I was most interested in, really isn't a factor at all. I think if it had just been about them and about their dynamic and relationship, even if it wasn't Hermione, like, even if it was just them being rivals, like, academically and that kind of thing, I think it would have been more interesting. It also would have been more new adult, which is a little bit more my speed. Whereas as it was just kind of on the back burner. And then we have Libby kind of getting into a relationship with one of the other 6 and Parisa, but that's because Parisa is, like, sleeping with everybody, which gave me, like, weird vibes. Like, I feel like the author really wanted it to be, like, a power move, and it just wasn't reading that way exactly. So it was just very off-putting. And then on top of that, like, the whole time this story is going on, I'm just kind of like, okay, fair enough, I guess. But then we get to the end of it, and there's this huge twist with the boyfriend who's, like, not even in the story, being, like, I guess, the big bad in quotation marks. Like, he travels through time, and he's been working with Atlas, and, like, you have to kill somebody so that he can be one of the 6, but he's actually in love with Libby, and, like, it was just a lot. And then she spends so many pages, so much of the end of this book is dedicated to literally explaining the twist. And I'm like, oh my God, if it's that deep, if it is that complex to where you have to spend the entire end of your book explaining it because you didn't foreshadow it all, I feel like you need to go back to the drawing board. Like, that was just really weird to me. I'm not enjoying this. I'm definitely not going to read the next one because I can't. Like, I am interested to see what's going to happen to Libby because she gets, like, taken, and I'm interested to see where that goes. But similar to, like, I read, what was it, like, The Ninth House or whatever by Leigh Bardugo, and, like, I liked it, but, like, I don't trust Leigh Bardugo. Same thing here. Like, I'm not gonna do this to myself. Like, I know what's gonna happen. I know what's gonna happen if I touch the stove. So I'm just not gonna do it. You know, dead dove do not eat. Like, I'm not gonna do it. So anyway, those are my most disappointing reads of 2022 so far. It is only August. There is still time left for more disappointing reads. Ultimately, and I said this in my other video, like, I do know what I like, so normally I'm pretty good about picking books that I'm gonna read, which is why I end up with so many 5-star reviews, but not always. Sometimes I pick one and I'm just like, man, this is gonna be great, and then I start reading it and it's just like, oh, okay, it's it's not great, which is upsetting. And I try my best not to like DNF books. I haven't DNF'd a book in a while. And what gets me to DNF is mostly, it's like unexplained or like unexpected random pregnancy. Pregnancy in general, that's a trope that I just do not jive with. Look at the fifth wave if you want to hear more about that. Weird religious things that happen. Like I said, I'm not a religious person, so sometimes when it skews a little bit too much, like it just kind of is like off-putting for me in particular. And then just like weird things that people do to their characters, or like weird, like, I don't think this is like the feminist win that you thought it was, like, and also just like getting so bored to the point where like I literally cannot make myself keep listening to a book. But otherwise, I do my best to finish these books. So hopefully with the rest of the year, I will have some more fantastic reads, but I'm sure there will also be some disappointing ones mixed in there as well. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, be sure to hit that like button down below, and don't forget to subscribe to Top Books with me every week. That's everything I got for today, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.